Anyone who's created something amazing, something you really admire or respect in them, they've written their own story. They've written their own script. They're not just playing by the rules of society, those expected paths that are laid out for us in society. The people that I really admire and respect, they have been able to play by their own rules. They are the people who've worked through a lot of their own limiting beliefs, patterns, resistances, fears, anxieties, anger, and shame, and they've created a new life by working through and transforming heavy self-limiting beliefs. They've been able to leverage that ability to shift into birthing something beautiful in this world that they are deeply proud of and actually respect themselves for. And other people respect them too. Just think about it. Anyone you really respect and admire, the majority of people who've created something really awesome, really admirable, something that's out of the box, that's like, wow, how did they have such a deep, incredible impact? They've served as a model for me by healing their internal limiting beliefs. None of them, when you hear their stories, had a really easy childhood. None of them had this perfect upbringing and parents who were ideal parents for them, and they also grew up in this difficult, highly patriarchal society with its material limitations. I had a difficult childhood growing up, as I've expressed, with a mother who wasn't able to be very nurturing and there for me, despite playing this good mother role on the surface, because she cared a lot about how she was perceived by her friends and her community. But when it came to being truly there for me and emotionally mature and present, she didn't have that bandwidth or capacity. She was very much focused on the external. And my father, he had a narcissistic personality. But that story was my number one victim story of why I couldn't grow into a greater container, of why I had to stay in the old job that I found myself in, stuck in a way by choice, because my energy was, in fact, choosing that old job, choosing to stay in that old job because I wasn't willing to see who I could be without that job. I felt like I needed it for survival safety reasons. And while that may have been partially true on some level, on another level, there was a missed opportunity for me to grow out of that smaller container I had allowed myself to stay in because of fear and anxiety. I was afraid of being seen. I was afraid of growing into this greater container, this greater self. I had a lot of fears and resistances to growing into a greater version of myself, a greater identity. That's because I didn't feel that I could show up as a cause of my reality. I kept feeling like I was always at the effect of the circumstances that surrounded me. And I felt very trapped in those circumstances. The circumstances of working a job that I didn't have a passion for, that didn't feel aligned with my soul and heart's calling, even though it was aligned with the current energy that I was presenting at the time as this person who needed to protect herself, this very limited identity person, self preservation type of identity that I was attached to at the time. So I didn't believe that I could actually step into a bigger role, show up as a more high vibrational version of myself, a version of myself who had courage, a version of myself who was willing to take risks, a version of myself that was willing to try new things, even if I failed at first, which during this time that I started a YouTube channel, I feel like I have been failing. I feel like I've had these stumbling moments, these roadblocks. It's actually felt pretty uncomfortable at times, sometimes to get in front of the camera. I have days where it just flows a little easier and other days where it feels like it's a bit forced and there's some anxiety and a little bit of self-consciousness there. I'm able to thankfully regulate myself and detach from those limiting thoughts that flood in about how I might be feeling in a moment when I'm recording a video. Like, this isn't good, I'm saying or doing something wrong. I'm able to allow that energy to settle down and disidentify with it, which enables me to move forward with the video and actually get these videos recorded. Thankfully, that is something I have worked with because I've worked with these parts of myself that are very self-preservation focused, that are very anxious around being seen, about creating something of value that's a beautiful offering to an audience where there is the potential to be judged by certain people who may be watching the video. thinking, oh, your lighting is bad. Oh, this is bad. This doesn't look professional enough. Whatever thoughts I've had that are negative and critical about myself, I still have a very active critical part. But instead of allowing that active critical part to keep ruling the show and allowing it to keep telling me what I can't do and who I need to stay stuck as, which is not you, by the way, you are aware of that limiting identity, that very critical, judgmental part of yourself. It was a part that was created in childhood. A lot of us have at least one, maybe more critical parents or a critical caregiver that really reinforced that part where we had to show up in a certain way that was very appeasing to that critical parent. And so that critical part in ourselves got born, that critical part that wanted to please so it could stay safe, so it could feel safe enough in the company of mom or dad or Aunt Berta or Uncle Bart. This critical part was born to protect us, to keep us playing small, to keep us people pleasing. It's a part of yourself that you don't respect, that you don't love or admire. It's a part of yourself that you likely feel annoyed by at this point. If you've had this pattern, this hypercritical, judgmental part operating in your system for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, if you're compulsively afraid of others' judgments, then you're not going to be willing to take risks in your life. You're not going to be willing to deviate from the expected societal path or the path that was laid out by your parents, the path that your parents expected you to take in order to please them, to make them look good. You are not going to feel safe enough in your nervous system because you have this part running the show that says, I need to do XYZ things. I need to behave in XYZ ways so I can be approved by my parents, so I can be approved by society, so no one will judge me, so there won't even be an opportunity for people to judge me if I'm operating in such an expected and normalized way. You don't have to keep letting this hypercritical, judgmental, and people pleasing part that's so worried about others' validation and approval rule the show of your life. You can actually start showing up as the cause of your life instead of the effect of your life. Your current circumstances are only the effect of who you've been, that past momentum. The longer you keep showing up as this person that you don't respect, that you don't admire, and you keep giving your power away to this very scared part of you that's afraid to step into a larger container, that's afraid to grow into a bigger identity. I've had those fears myself. That's why it actually took me into my early 40s to leave my old job and start this YouTube channel because I was so afraid and I was listening to that voice. I was listening to that voice who said, what if I look foolish? What if I sound foolish? What if things aren't perfect and I can't control every little aspect of it to make it look really good? And so I actually showed up on YouTube for those first 8 months, having a lot of resistance, just hitting record, putting in very little effort, and then not thinking about it much afterwards because I was so afraid of my own critical part. I was afraid I would obsess about the process if I put any real attention and energy into it, that I would obsess about the production aspects and I would overwhelm myself and I would give up and quit. I was so afraid that I just couldn't do it because I had so much resistance and fear. I knew that this hypercritical part could take over and destroy the whole thing if I took more of an active role in my own channel in the production aspects beyond just simply hitting record, actually showing up in the moment in a higher vibrational light in my authentic energy as who I really wanted to be, but actually wasn't yet. It was somebody I was starting to become, but I was still resisting that part of me, that greater container. So I was passing off that work to my husband for 8 months, and he saw that I wasn't really putting in the energy. So he wasn't putting in too much energy himself, which is why the channel was a dud in those first 8 months of its existence. I'm not doing that anymore. I've seen through that tendency to be so scared of my critical judging energy. It still was an identity shift to even just start the channel in the first place. That was a powerful move to start it, even if I wasn't showing up in the best energy early on because I was too afraid to take an active role in many of the real production aspects of it beyond hitting record. So that was still something that was still me leveling up my identity a little bit by just starting I was very aware that I had this heavy shadow aspect of avoiding taking an active role in production, of really seeing how the channel was performing. I didn't really want to know, and I didn't think about it for many months because I was afraid of my hypercritical, judgmental parts getting in the way of that, wanting to take over, wanting to control and be tight around it and gripping. And I have to say, there has been some of that energy coming up now that I have been taking more of an active role in the production process. And I have been vetting my own channel for the performance and the quality for what it actually delivers to you. And I've been taking better care of myself for each video. That hypercritical part has been coming up a little bit. Also, another part that desires to see great, fast success has also been coming up too. I was afraid of those parts coming up, the one that would be really ambitious, the one that would be also very afraid to see the channel grow, and another part that was hypercritical and wanted to control and make everything just perfect. So, this is how our egoic parts work, these shadow parts of ourselves that are afraid to step into our higher power. If you are thinking about something that you want to step into, some greater container, but you have lots of fear and you have lots of resistance, or you're thinking about leaving something that feels like you're growing out of it, it doesn't feel aligned with who you want to become, then this is a sign to start moving towards that thing that scares you. We have to start moving towards the things that scare us to grow. It was very challenging for me at first to start this channel. It was very challenging for me to go through these phases with this channel of seeing all these shadow aspects. And I let a big shadow aspect of avoiding the production aspects of the channel go for about 8 months because I was so afraid of how my egoic parts might react. If you have that hyperactive perfectionist controlling part and you have these avoidant tendencies, I've had both very strongly, both that resistant avoidant tendency and I've had that hypercritical judging perfectionistic tendency. These really are just two sides of the same coin. They're not really so much a different energy. In both cases, there was a lot of fear lurking. Both parts are really resisting. In both cases, I'm resisting meeting the emotion that's being called to be met. In this avoidant part, there's this fear of showing up imperfectly. So if I'm fearing showing up imperfectly, I'm actually not going to look at it at all, or I'm going to show up imperfectly, but I'm not going to actually track anything. So I don't have to see myself looking imperfectly and confront that anxiety that I would have based on this part who's hypercritical of myself looking imperfect and having to confront the fact that I am imperfect. I'm an imperfect human being and have to work with that and grow out of that and move beyond that to grow into a greater container of identity beyond fearing myself looking and showing up as imperfect in this scenario on YouTube. I had to confront both my avoidant side, my avoidant nature, which is a part of me that learned early on in childhood that I could avoid feeling imperfect, like a complete and utter failure, by not trying in the first place or by trying imperfectly and not actually finding out any results or accounting for anything and choosing to hide and not know. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is to control and micromanage every little aspect and be very involved in something you're producing. And that is another extreme. You will not have any fun with that, and you'll probably end up failing in that too. So, either way, whichever road you go, there's going to be the opportunity to confront your fear of failure, to confront your fear of seeing yourself as an imperfect, flawed human being who doesn't have all the answers, who doesn't show up as this amazing version of themselves right off the bat when they're starting a new passion project, or they're starting a YouTube channel, or they're starting a new job, a new career that's unfamiliar to them. Whenever we start something that's brand new, that's unfamiliar, but it is something that is in our soul and in our heart to try and do and show up for, there's always going to be that initial anxiety. There's always going to be a little, or most oftentimes a lot of fear, resistance, anxiety to show up and be seen, to show up and actually see yourself as an imperfect, flawed human being who's on a path of growth and evolution, who's not showing up as this bright, shiny penny right off the bat. This person who has it all together, who's perfectly polished, who has these A class produced videos right off the bat, if we're following this YouTube example, to allow yourself to be seen as an imperfect human being and to allow yourself to see yourself as an imperfect human being and to be able to work with that and allow yourself to move through and with that to meet the emotion. Perhaps you're going to feel some shame. You're going to feel some regret. In my case, I felt a little regret of how long I allowed my fears to take the reins in my life. Instead of me showing up as a cause, I was allowing my fears to run the show. And now I'm having some of the opposite perfectionistic, controlling anxieties come up because I am now working on the production aspects of my YouTube channel a lot more. But I'm seeing these other perfectionistic, hypercritical energies and feeling like I need to live up to this certain level with every single video. It needs to be really good and it needs to get better and better. And while I do have the intention to make every single video better and better, there may be some days where maybe they're not as great as the last video I just produced. Maybe there's something off or I just wasn't quite in the full flow that day. These opportunities to grow out of an old identity through whatever passion project we're working on, it is important to say yes to whatever that thing is in your heart's calling, to take the action, to not let your fears keep determining your reality, keep determining who you're going to keep being, because you don't want to be that same old you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Otherwise, this wouldn't resonate with you at all. You want to grow into a greater container. You want to be someone you're deeply proud of, someone that you respect and admire. And if that's the case for you, then it is important to say yes to that scary, hard thing that you've been putting off, that scary thing that you want to try, that person that you want to grow into. It is time for you to shine your light bright and to stop hiding and stop fearing who you're meant to shift into, who you're meant to become. You are not this limited personality that society asks you to become early on because of your early woundings and childhood. You are meant to meet what you fear. You are meant to meet those parts of you that are hurting, to give them love and kindness and compassion, to hold those parts of you, to be with them, to allow yourself to feel that emotion, or maybe it's multiple emotions. A lot of times it's fear, sometimes it's anger and resentment, sometimes it's shame. Whatever those emotions are that are the main reason that you are not saying yes to that next thing that you want to move towards in birth, and why you keep saying maybe yes to this old thing that you felt like you wanted to leave behind or shift away from for a long time, yet you haven't because you've been too afraid. It's time to let yourself feel the fear fully and then make the choice to start showing up imperfectly at first, because that's how we start. We show up imperfectly and we allow ourselves to feel imperfect. We allow ourselves to see ourselves as imperfect, as a perfectly beautiful, flawed human being who is actually trying, who is actually showing up, who's actually taking steps. And the more that you compassionately nurture and you be with those parts of you that are the most resistant to showing up in this new way that calls to you, this new identity that feels more spacious, more aligned with how you ultimately see yourself, the more that you heal those parts of you by doing shadow work, by doing some somatic release work, by doing some IFS, internal family systems parts work with those parts of yourself that are scared, that are resistant, that have held you back for so long. The more that you meet those emotions and those parts of you that are holding those emotions, and give those parts of yourself with that emotion the love, the reassurance that it's safe to move towards this thing that is retraining your body, your nervous system, and these parts of yourself, that it is safe to move towards a bigger, brighter, bolder future, a bigger, brighter, bolder you, a you that you are actually proud of, someone that you respect and admire, someone who is living in this greater container, who is living a more bold, vibrant, aligned life. I'm asking you today to take a look at those parts of you, do some shadow work meditation, do some somatic meditation. I'll link some past meditations to shadow work videos, IFS work, somatic release work in the comment section of this video. But I'm encouraging you to be with your parts. And you don't even have to make this into a formal thing. You just need to hold a little bit of space and compassion for those parts of yourself. You just need to allow yourself to slow down long enough to ask yourself, what am I feeling? What's hurting inside? Or why am I resisting this particular thing that I know in my soul that I want to move towards? Sometimes when you ask that question to yourself, the answer that might come up is, I'm afraid of looking foolish. I'm afraid of embarrassing myself. I'm afraid of losing something. Oftentimes, there's a fear of failing. There's a fear of doing things poorly, which I certainly have. And ultimately, I just had to allow myself to do things poorly or imperfect for a while so that I could become okay with that and actually start doing better and grow out of that fear of failure, because failure unlocks the key to growth. If we're willing to fail and we're willing to show up imperfectly for a while, and we're willing to keep looking at the resistances and fears that we have and give those parts of ourselves love and kindness and authentic care and attention and be with those parts of ourselves so we can feel the emotion and let that emotion move through and out of us as many times as it takes to allow those parts to feel more safe within our nervous system so that we can actually move towards the thing, towards the abundant, life aligned life that we desire. That is the key, to have all parts of you feel more secure, feel more safe. And this isn't about getting rid of these parts. We absolutely don't want to be more critical of these parts because that just reinforces the old story more. The more critical or shaming or harsh we are with our parts, we really want to be that kind, compassionate witness and realize that we're not these parts of ourselves. It is not me. When you're feeling angry, don't say, I am angry. Say, I feel angry, because that creates more distance between you and the anger. Same thing with fear. Instead of saying, I am fearful, say, I feel fear. That creates some distance, some space between yourself and the fear, because you are not the fear. You are not the anger. You are not the shame. You are not the guilt. That is an emotion that is expressing itself. You are not the resistance either. You see that a part of you is holding resistance. You see that a part of you is feeling and holding this anger because some circumstance in your life right now is reminding you of a past wound in your childhood, is reminding you of a past pattern you had with a certain family member or with a friend. But that is a pattern. That is not you. That is a pattern that a certain part of you is holding and is using to keep creating certain effects in your life. Because when you live a life determined by patterns, determined by these parts that are holding on to these emotions that you pushed down and resisted when they came up in your early childhood experiences, when you allow those old emotions to keep creating your life in the present moment, then you stay stuck. You stay stuck indefinitely until you're willing to meet those emotions, until you're willing to work with those parts of yourself that are still hurting. All they need is your loving kindness, you as that compassionate, loving witness for them, to know that you are not the same as that emotion. Yes, you feel this emotion. This part is expressing an emotion within you, but you are not the emotion itself. You are aware of the emotion. You can create some distance between yourself and the emotion and identify with that compassionate witness part of yourself who is able and capable of holding space, of allowing that part of yourself that's feeling anger, that's feeling shame, that's feeling guilt, that's feeling a lot of fear, resistance, whatever it is. You can be with that part of yourself. You can ask that part of yourself as a kind, loving witness what it's feeling, why it's feeling this way, and then allow yourself to express the emotion without getting caught up in a story. That part may have a story to tell, and that's just fine. But don't keep allowing yourself to identify with that story that part of you might be telling you. Instead of believing the story that the part of you is telling you, hold space around that story. Allow the story to come up if it needs to, but be present with that part of you that's hurting, that's holding that heavy emotion, that heavy story. But don't identify with the story. Love on that part of you. Provide that part of you the space and compassion, and allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to shake that emotion out if you need to. That is a somatic release. That often happens for me. The two ways I release emotion the most when a part of me is feeling a certain past emotion is usually I end up crying when I'm asking these loving, kind questions, these questions of inquiry to this part of myself as a witness. I find myself often crying the more that I go into it, and I find myself often shaking too. My intention is to simply be there for that part, to hold the space, that compassionate, loving presence, instead of over identifying with that story that the part of me is telling. I intentionally allow that part of me to feel what it needs to feel, to release what it needs to release in whatever way it needs to express in the comfort and safety of my own home. And I hold that space, that loving space. I just wanted to describe that modality because it's a very powerful and also very simple modality. If you have the capacity to hold a loving presence, a loving space for yourself in that moment with that part of you that is hurting. And that part of you has been driving your story. It has been allowing you to keep showing up as an effect in your life instead of the cause. So once we allow that emotion to express itself, that part of ourselves to be heard with loving kindness and compassion and to release some of that emotion, you'll probably have to go back to it. It won't be just a one and you're done thing. You'll probably have to revisit it. However, the charge of that emotion in that story will be less the next time. And the next time that you keep going back to it and hold space for this part of you, that will shift and that will relax and release over time. The more and more you show up for these parts of yourself that are hurting and that have been driving your story up until now, allow yourself that space, allow yourself that time. The more and more you do that, the more and more your energy will be liberated so that you can shift into a version of yourself that you truly admire and respect, a version of yourself that's less scared, that's less fearful, to move towards those things that are calling you, those things that are in your heart and your soul to do. That is part of the process of moving towards a new project, of starting anything new, allowing yourself to fail and be imperfect and not show up with this perfectly polished production in this way that you're envisioning yourself to show up as this more together kind of person. I was so not together in the beginning, but I had to allow myself to be so not together for a while so that I could start to grow into a person who progressively feels more and more together. And I still don't feel together. Today, I actually had a little bit of anxiety about showing up and recording and had to do a couple takes starting off because I wasn't in the flow starting out. And so that was the case for me today. Even though I've recorded a bunch of videos before, I'm allowing myself to grow into this person, into this greater version of myself, this confident Alara Bloom YouTuber person. I'm encouraging you to start moving towards something you may have been putting off, you may have been scared to do, to start letting go of things that feel like they've had their season, and to start moving towards those things that your soul and heart is deeply calling you to do. Start becoming the cause of your reality and stop letting yourself continue to be an effect of past momentum. You can start to feel safer and safer in your nervous system by showing up for yourself differently, by choosing yourself first, by creating healthy boundaries with other people who are takers in your life or narcissistic. Show up for yourself. This is your bold and beautiful life. I'm wishing you well. Until next time, be blessed. Much love and peace. Goodbye.